Would winning 24 games this season for the Detroit Pistons be considered a success, a failure, or an in-between type of season? We'll talk about that and give my opinion in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Koo Cahill. You can find me over on Twitter at Koo Cahill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free to available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So today's going to be an interesting episode because we're just a few short days away from the Pistons' first preseason game, right? So, and just last week, a week and a half ago, I think we recorded an episode talking about like what's the expectations for this team this upcoming year. And later on, I want to talk about Jaylen Duren. And we'll talk about Isaiah Stewart as well later on. But I want to stay on the topic of, I guess we're going back to expectations because today, Bleacher Report, I'm recording this on the 3rd of October. Bleacher Report put an article out of what they expect each team to win. Like how many wins do they think each team will end up with? And the answer that they had for the Detroit Pistons has caused quite a bit of, I don't want to say a stir up, but definitely a lot of talking within the Pistons fan base. People on one side, people on this side, people in the middle. It's just caused a lot of talk. And I wanted to come on here and discuss it with you guys and give my opinion on it. So, like I said, Bleacher Report does predict the Pistons to win 24 games this upcoming year. That is basically the same as their over-under. Their over-under is set at 24.5. So Bleacher Report has them going under their 24.5 over-under, which would continue the streak that they have currently of hitting their under over and over and over again. They've done that, I believe, the last 3 to 4 years, I believe. So would 24 wins be an improvement? This is where I'm at with it. The Pistons are in a unique situation that I don't think many teams have found themselves in, where that the Pistons winning 24 games would be a 10-win improvement over their previous season. If you win 10 more games than you did your previous season, almost always that's considered a success. Like winning 10 more games, having a 10-win improvement is a pretty good improvement year over year. I almost want to say that's a pretty drastic improvement year over year. So I feel like for most teams, if they win 10 more games in the previous year, everyone's like, oh, this was a great year. This was a big step forward. This was an exceptional, this was a really happy season. However, I think the Pistons are in the rare situation where they could win 10 more games than last season. And I think the majority of the fan base would still sit here and say it was a failure of a season. And I can't sit here and say that they would be wrong for saying that. Because this past season was considered a step back. This past season was not considered, this past season was not what people thought was going to happen. 14 games was a major step back. So I do understand that a lot of fans feel like they shouldn't be trying to take a step forward from last year. They should be trying to take a step forward from where they were supposed to be last year. So like the previous year, I believe they won 23 games. They should be trying to take a step forward from the 23-game win mark, not trying to make the step forward from this place they took a major step back from. I get that. I understand that. This is where, and if you guys listen to the podcast throughout the whole offseason, I said this over and over and over again during the offseason. I didn't know where to stand, how to feel about the Pistons offseason. And I still don't. It's very, I feel like the line of thinking with the Pistons offseason has a bit of inconsistencies from, let me not say from the front office, from the fan base expectation. There's a line of inconsistencies for me. because Trajan, I feel like I've said this over and over. I feel like Trajan has made it clear, especially at media day when he even spoke about it and said it himself, but through his actions all offseason was if they were really trying to prioritize winning games this upcoming year, they would have made more aggressive moves. If they really wanted to make this like big jump to 35 wins, they would have made aggressive moves. They would have got rid of more players that just played on the worst season in Pistons history. They would not have brought back as many guys as they did from a 14-win team if Trajan's goal was we want to get to 35, 30-plus wins this upcoming year. So his actions didn't speak that. However, along with that, I feel like I feel like I got a pretty good pulse on the majority of the fan base. I deal with the fan base every single day. I see what everyone's saying almost all the time. The pulse from the fan base is the exact opposite of that, though. Like Trajan at media day said he doesn't want to really put the goal on win-loss. He wants to put the season's goal on just seeing guys improve and get better. And his actions all offseason go along with that they're not really worried about winning 30 games. They just want to see improvement. However, the majority, I would say, of the fan base believes simply just bringing in the veterans and keeping these young guys, that right there is going to get to 35, 30-plus wins. So it's just like, to me, it's a little bit of an inconsistency between what the front office is trying to do and what they did versus what the fan base is expecting. Because I don't feel like the front office's moves were moves that should have the fan base believing they made moves to try to be a winning team this year or to try and make a big jump win-wise this upcoming year. I don't believe that's what it is. So it's like, I don't really get where it's a very confusing situation. The Pistons are in a very, very confusing situation with what expectations should be. Because along with this, Trajan is preaching patience, and I understand that. The fan base is going into year 4, or actually this is going to be year 5, of what is potentially the worst 5-year stretch. Actually, not potentially. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think this is probably the worst 5-year stretch in Pistons history. Pistons fans have went through the last 4 years, heading into year 5, hearing more about patience, so there's a lot of impatience happening. Along with this, Pistons fans are witnessing other teams like the Rockets, like the Magic. Heck, I would even say not as closely similar, but a team like the Cavs, who rebuilt and kind of turned it around quickly. They are witnessing other teams who started rebuilding around the same time as them hit their stride in year 2, year 3, year 4. Like, the teams are hitting their stride that started rebuilding around the Pistons' time a year earlier than the Pistons this past year, probably around this year as the Pistons, like year 3, year 4. They're watching this happen, but yet it seems as though the Pistons are still in this, we're wait and seeing kind of, part of their rebuild. So I know I'm kind of going all over the place with this, is because this situation is just so unique to where, like I said earlier, like 10+ wins from any other team would be considered a success, I feel like, for the majority of the fan base. But going from 14 to 24, what does 24 wins would have you, like the 13th seed maybe? So you still would be at the bottom of the league. You're just not the worst team in the league. And is that really what you want? Is that really what the goal should be? I guess this is the question I want to ask to everybody. Should that really what the goal should be? Just not be last? Just not be at the very bottom going into year 4 of Kay Cunningham's career? Going into year 4 of the rebuild, year 4. Going into year 5. I'm sorry. Going to year 5 of the rebuild, year 4 of Kay Cunningham's career. Coming off the offseason where you just signed him to this rookie max extension. Going into the year of having to decide futures when it comes to the contract with a Jaylen Duren and a Jaden Ivey. Coming off a year where you just removed the entire front office and removed the entire coaching staff, basically. Is that really what the goal should be heading into this year, just not being last? And I guess the question that would then follow up that question would be, at what point is the goal no longer going to be, let's just not be last? At what point will the goal be, let's actually be a good team? Let's field a good product. Let's field a good NBA product on the floor. And I guess I will wrap it up here with this. There is a section of the fan base that believes this year will be that year, that all they needed were vets. All they needed were vets that just wanted to be around. They didn't need to change up the whole team. They didn't need to go be aggressive. Simply adding vets will be worth plus 20 wins. Am I that optimistic? Not really, because that's just not usually how things go. You don't usually return more than half the roster of a 14-win team, give a few more vets, and you see 20-plus wins, which is why I think that 10-win mark is probably right where expectations should be. And if that happened, if they won 24, 25 wins, I would probably be coming on here saying, well, they met my expectations for what I expected this upcoming year. But I don't feel like that would be the case for a lot of fans. A lot of fans feel like that they've done what they need to do to hit 30-plus wins. And I think that's why to me, I just feel like there's inconsistencies between what the Pistons actually did and what a lot of the fan base is expecting. I just don't see. It's hard for me to picture. How about this? This is the way I'll actually wrap it up here. This is how I want to put it. If you were told, remove the team, just remove the team, remove the name, remove the players, remove the team. There's a blank picture. If I came up to you and said, this team, the previous year won 14 games. The next year they won 24. Do you think that most often you would say, oh, that was a good improvement over the previous year? Most times you'd say yes. Like just most times you'd say, most situations you'd be like, okay, yeah, that's a good improvement. But the Pistons are just in a unique situation where I don't know if that should be accepted in year 5, even if that's what the roster screams to me. The roster to me screams 24, 25 wins. But even though that's what the roster screams to me, even though I'm just speaking in my opinion, even if that's what the roster screams to me and what the moves have screamed to me and what the actions have screamed to me that they expect to happen this year, if they meet those expectations that I have, I don't know if even then I should say, well, yeah, you met my expectations, so therefore it's a success. Because going to year 5, 5+ years of not winning at least 25, like that's just crazy to me. I'm sorry. I get that. I personally believe that's probably what's going to end up happening, but it's going to be hard to convince me that that's a good thing and that you're on the right pace when you are going through 5 years of a rebuild and you've yet to exceed 25 wins. Like, it's just going to be hard to convince me. I think it's going to be hard to convince fans that 5 years into a rebuild, you just gave your franchise player a rookie max contract, and all you have to show for it is like an average win total of 22 every year. It's going to be hard to convince the fan base of that, and I don't blame anyone for it. So I guess I'll wrap it up with saying, is 24 wins a successful season? No, I would say it's not a successful season. I would say it meets expectations, but I would also say expectations that I have wouldn't be a successful season anyways, going into year 5 of a rebuild. If you get what I'm saying. It's a confusing situation. It's a very unique situation. I don't think many teams have went through this, to be honest. I'm not going to lie to you. So I hope you get what I'm trying to say here. But let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter @KookHill how you guys feel. Would 24 wins be a successful season for the Detroit Pistons with it being plus 10 wins over the previous season? Let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter @KookHill. When we come back, Jaylen Duren is the key to them exceeding the expectations that maybe the over-unders, the books, Bleacher Report have for the Detroit Pistons this upcoming year. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page when you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. I've told you guys this many a times. A few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to try out. Didn't know anything about it. I went and tried out FanDuel. I have not turned back since. It's super easy to use. It's super self-explanatory. But most importantly, it's extremely fun to use. All these years later, I still am using it almost every single week. I have a ton of fun with FanDuel. I know you will too. You can get started again with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet with FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button at the YouTube channel or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. Jaylen Duren might be the key to the Pistons exceeding their expectations. And the only way the Pistons reach the expectations that I think some of the fan base has, despite them not going aggressive in the offseason and spending their $60 million with aggressive mindset, the only way that they exceed these expectations of Bleacher Report and of the books and people like myself who look at the roster and say it's a better roster, but it's not a great roster. The only way this happens is if the young guys make these big steps. And I don't mean just one. I mean like multiple young guys are making steps forward. And I think that's probably where the fan base is at. The fan base believes, I believe a lot of you guys probably believe this. You can let me know in the comment section. You can let me know in the chat. I'm live streaming this. You also let me know on Twitter if you feel differently. But I think the majority of the fan base believes that with these new vets, with these more better suited, I should say, veterans that they've brought to the team will lead to big steps forward from all the young guys, which then will be what causes the big jump in wins. It won't be just the vets. It'll be the big steps from the young guys. I feel like everyone's expecting big steps from all the young guys, which I understand. Going into year 4, going to year 5 of the rebuild, year 3 for a lot of guys, year 4 of Cade, you expect guys to continue to climb up and get better. And yeah, if the young guys do get better, this team should be better than people are projecting them to be. That is true. However, year over year, and I think we've said, if you've been a long-term listener of Locked On Pistons, you'll know, going all the way back to the first year of me recording this podcast, I've cautioned fans by saying, and I think the evidence has proved itself, you can't assume big jumps from every single one of your young players. It doesn't happen often. It's very rare that you see a big jump. You see leaps from multiple young guys. You can see a jump from maybe 1, maybe 2. But most likely, you'll see a jump from 1, and then some other guys stagnate. Heck, some guys may take a step back. So expecting jumps from every single young guy is just not realistic. So I want to talk about what at this point I believe, or who at this point is the young guy that if they took a jump forward and nobody else did, would have the most impact on winning. And now at this point, we've talked about this actually at multiple points throughout the offseason. We've talked about what happens if Jaden Ivey makes a jump. What happens if Asar Thompson were to make a jump. Jaylen Duren, I think, is being trusted by the front office, by the coaching staff, and I'm not going to lie to you, I guess trusted by me to be the one to really accelerate the expectations this upcoming season. I think he has the most impact on whether the Pistons make this big jump or not. We're at day 3 of practices for the Pistons through training camp. And each day we've heard JB Bickerstaff, Detroit News just wrote an article about it, or Detroit Free Press, I'm sorry, I believe. Actually, let me double check that. I want to give it the right shout out here. I believe actually it was Omari who wrote it, but I do want to make sure I give the right credit to who wrote that. Yeah, it was Omari. Thank you. Omari just wrote an article for the Free Press from JB Bickerstaff commenting that they're going to unlock Jaylen Duren's playmaking this year. They're going to use a lot more of Jaylen Duren in the half court as a DHO hub, in split action. They're going to be using him a lot in the half court, what it seems like. And we heard him say that in media day, but he's echoed it in each day of training camp. So I think, there's been a lot of talk, throughout the offseason about, okay, who's going to take up that secondary playmaking from Cade when he's on the floor. And it seems like that JB believes that Jaylen Duren can soak up a lot of that secondary playmaking. And having a big man that is capable of creating for himself from the elbow, creating for others from the elbow, who's capable of getting a defensive rebound, maybe dribbling up into a DHO like Andre used to. I remember that first year with Dwayne Casey coaching Blake and Andre. I remember Dwayne Casey coming in the press conference and saying that Andre's, getting that defensive rebound, going into straight dribble handoff action was actually their best offense point per possession. So there is value to having a big that can get a defensive rebound, bring down the court before a defense can get set, and immediately get into your offensive set. Immediately get into your offensive action. I think Jaylen Duren can do that because of his ball handling and because of his passing. He's a really good creator, again, for himself from the elbow area, getting to the basket. He's a really good finisher. He's one of the best finishers in the NBA at his position this past year. So offensively, I think they're really going to try to maximize him to the absolute most, which I do think maximizing Jaylen Duren within the half court offensively would therefore elevate Cade, would elevate especially their off-ball shooters, guys like Simone Fontecchio, guys like Malik Beasley, guys like Tobias Harris. I really think it would help them. And I'm really curious to see how it would help Jane Ivey, especially in DHOs and getting downhill. Like, I think just and trying to maximize Duren in the half court offensively really elevates everyone else on the floor offensively. But I don't think that is where it would impact the most win-loss wise. I do think it would have a pretty big impact on their offense. I do think it would really, really help. I'm really excited to see how they use him in the preseason, if they actually do give him this more usage. As long as they try to cut back, let him know the stuff that he was doing last year when it comes like the post fadeaway middies, the pull-up middies, stuff like that he started to do at the end of last season that was basically a turnover. Hey, let's cut that out. Let's trim the fat off of that, and let's just keep it to this. I think it'd really elevate the Pistons offense, along with having more shooters, obviously with having that offensive engine that's Cade Cunningham. I really think maximizing Duren the half-court offensively is a good idea by JB Bickerstaff, which we'll talk about JB Bickerstaff in the next episode because he's actually accepting of analytics and looking at the numbers, whereas if you go back to last year and heard what Monty had to say about it, it's, again, just another example of just a massive difference of where guys stand and the kind of coaching that you got. But anyways, offensively it would help. But I don't think that's where the impact is really going to be felt win-loss wise. Jaylen Duren's defense. They're talking a lot about his half-court usage offensively. They're not talking enough, in my opinion. And now it's really early. It's only 3 days of training camp. But I'm not hearing enough about Jaylen Duren impacting the team defensively. Not even at media day. I'm not hearing enough. And hopefully I hear more of it throughout preseason. But him defensively needs to be the main priority for this basketball team. Jaylen Duren taking that step defensively needs to be the main priority of this team's development. Not Jane Ivey, not Asar Thompson. The main development needs to be getting Jaylen Duren to being a good defensive five-man. Because if you can have a five-man who is that lethal offensively without jump shot, he's lethal offensively without jump shot. One of the best pick-and-roll bigs in the league, a really good passing big, a damn good finishing big, an insanely athletic big, super strong big, who's capable of being used in multiple different areas offensively. He's lethal offensively. But if he's going to continue to be, not very good at all defensively, just a complete, he was straight up bad defensively this past year. Bad. If you can get him to being the anchor of your defense, it completely warps the Pistons team. I'm telling you right now, if people don't believe me, I'm telling you, Jaylen Duren becoming a good defensive five, Jaylen Duren becoming the anchor of the defense completely changes everything for this team. Completely changes everything for them, defense, or for this team. They would instantly become way better. They would win 30-plus games. I'm telling you that right now. If Jaylen Duren improves defensively, they win 30-plus wins or 30-plus games. Easy. Because this is an offensive roster. They should be fine offensively, but they're not a good defensive roster. And a lot of it has to do with the fact they don't have an anchor defensively. They haven't had a rim protector defensively. They get tore up in the pick and roll because their five-man has not been very good in whatever coverage they use, whether it's playing at the level, playing high, playing in drop, switching. They just haven't been good in the pick and roll. Excuse me. I'm still feeling sick, guys. Sorry about that. But Jaylen Duren has to become better defensively. You combine his defense improvement with what he's able to do for this team offensively and what they're trying to do for him or with him offensively, it warps. It warps the team. It just does. I know it's incredibly small sample size, but you can look at it and take these things away. Those 4 games before Duren got hurt and was actually engaged defensively. After that, he just was never engaged again. And he talked about how he needed to be locked in defensively at media day. But those 4 games, the Pistons were not winning those games because their offense was elite. They were not winning those games because Cade was averaging 40 points. Like, that's not what was happening. It wasn't because Ivy was exploding offensively. It wasn't because of their offense, those games. They were winning games at the beginning of last year. Those first 4 games, they were looking so good because Duren was dominating defensively. He was active as hell defensively. He was blocking shots. He was protecting the rim. He was engaged at every possession. And that you saw how that impacted the team. That is going to be the main impact on the Pistons win-loss record. So Jaylen Duren is the key to this team's success. He's going to be fine offensively. He's going to be really good offensively. Defensively, they need him to be good. He can't be bad. He can't be as bad as he was last year. He was awful last year defensively. If he can be good defensively and just lock in like he was at the beginning of last year, this team will be infinitely better than people are expecting them to be. That's the key. That is the key to the Pistons exceeding everyone's expectations. Not Ivy, not as much, or let's say not as much Ivy, not as much Asar Thompson. It's Jaylen Duren's defense. So let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at KukaHill. Do you guys agree or disagree with that take? Again, you can let me know in the comment section over on Twitter at KukaHill. When we come back, Isaiah Stewart continues to talk about how he loves playing the 5 position, how he wants to play the 5 position. Is he actually going to get to play the 5 position this year? So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. I will say this. Jaylen Duren says he listens to the podcast, apparently. So, Duren, JD, if you're listening to the podcast, I have to assume I'm not the one telling you. Like, I have to assume the coaches have told you all offseason, front office has told you all offseason, training staff has told you all offseason. I have to assume that you are aware that your defense is that impactful. You could change the team. We all know how good you are. I know how good you are offensively. You are incredibly talented offensively. You have rare skills offensively at the 5 position. Combine that with a good defense, and you're the Pistons center of the future, and you're warping this team's future. It's as simple as that. And you showed in those 4 games you can do it. That's the thing. I think that's what upsets fans so much and gets fans feeling the type of way they feel sometimes, is that you show that you can do it. Like, you showed a 4-game sample where you're able to do it and translate the Pistons to wins. It was a very small sample, but they saw you able to do it. So it's somewhere in there. It's somewhere within you. You can do it. So, like, you have it in you to change the Pistons season. I seriously believe his defense changes everything. But Isaiah Stewart has talked about over and over already within 1 week about how he's super excited to finally play the 5 position. He wants to play the 5. He loves playing the 5 position. And that's something I've said in the podcast over and over and over again. He should be playing. He should be at the 5. 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 You know what's viable in 2024? A stretch 5, not a stretch 4. There's no such thing as stretch 4s no more. If you're a 4, you're expected to shoot 40% from 3. If you're not, you're not good. Like that's just the case. That's just what this NBA is now. What's valuable is having a stretch 5 that can switch. Having a 5-man that can shoot threes and then also be switchable on the defensive end. That's valuable. And I feel like Stu understands this. And it seems like he's ready to do it. I will say this. Wink, wink, elbow, elbow, nudge, nudge. I did hear rumblings throughout the offseason that Stu wanted to play. He wants to play at the 5 position. He feels like that's where he's utilized best. And I did hear rumblings that maybe he wasn't as excited about how he was used this past year. I heard rumblings about he feels like he is a 5, and he feels like he can bring more to the team as a 5. I heard rumblings of that throughout the offseason. So it makes sense that he's saying this at the beginning of training camp. And he's saying this on media day, that he wants to be at the 5 position. He thinks he can be great at the 5 position. I think a lot of us feel the exact same way. And I feel like everyone who watches him feels almost the exact same way. Stretch 5 that can switch is valuable. A stretch 4 in 2024 that can just play defense, that's what you're supposed to do. That's just expected. That's not unique. So I say that to say this. I thought for a second there it was for sure 100% that he's going to be the backup 5. But this is October 3rd now. And this is now the 3rd straight day. The 3rd straight day that I've seen the beat writers, I've seen people at practice, which I'll be at practice soon. Stay tuned, everybody. You'll be getting some of that access from me. But this is the 3rd straight day that I have seen one of the beat writers or someone at practice talk about how, or interview somebody, interview a coach, a player, write an article about Paul Reed impressing the hell out of the team. Paul Reed is going to end up, not like from his words, but with his play, demanding minutes. He's going to have to play. He's impressing players. So if this is the third straight day, okay? And I can't help but feel like that in previous years when guys like that jump off the radar early in training camp, and if they back it up in preseason, I feel like past evidence with the Pistons shows they end up in the rotation. Guys like Frank Jackson, guys like Killian Hayes this past year, like guys who maybe you didn't expect to initially be locks for the rotation, they end up in there. So JB is different. JB is a different coach. It may play out differently, but it seems like Paul Reed is really impressing guys. And Paul Reed was a fine player in Philly too. So it's like, it's not shocking that he's playing well. Like, he was a fine player in Philly. So if he's actually impressing him this much and he plays well in preseason, and he actually does force his way into playing minutes, is Stu going to get to play at the 5? Like, is he actually going to get to be the 5 on the floor? Or is he going to go back to playing the 4 again? And is that going to be best for the team? That's what I'm curious about now, because there's been too much talk. I might be reading too much into it, but my ears are perking up. My coup senses are tingling. There's been too much talk about Paul Reed already. I've seen more Paul Reed talk than I've seen Ron Holland talk. The only person I've seen people talk more about is Asar Thompson's jump shot, and he may not even play to start the regular season. The only guy that I've seen get talked about this much that may actually be able to play at the start of the regular season is Paul Reed. And that has my senses tingling, okay? So if they decide to play Paul Reed, what does that mean for Stu and where they're playing Stu at? That's what I'm going to be watching for in preseason. Because I think almost everyone believes, there's a few people, but I think that almost everyone believes that Stu's best position is at the 5. That he brings the most value as a backup 5. So if he's not playing that, I just wonder what's going to, like, how people are going to react, how it actually plays out on the floor, and, you know, how things go. But I don't know. I'm interested to see it now. I thought it was definitely a lock. I thought it was a lock Stu would be the backup 5. But now I'm starting to question it. I'm starting to question whether they're going to try to play him at the 4 and fit Paul Reed minutes in. And look, if Paul Reed is balling and him and Stu end up being a great pairing, I mean, hey, if it works, it works. Okay, so we'll see it play out. If it works, it works. I'd say past evidence suggests Stu at the 4 just is not the greatest idea. But if they try it with Paul Reed again, I guess we wait and see again to see how it plays out. I just would really like Stu to be the backup 5. I think that's where he's best at. I think he feels like that's where he's best at. I think like everyone feels like that's where he's best at. So I really appreciate it. I would personally like it if they just simply play him at the backup 5. And if Paul Reed's really impressing that much, he can be the 3rd big, and maybe you can trade him in the middle of the season. I don't know. But like I said, my coup senses are tingling. There's been too much talk about Paul Reed to make me think he just won't play at all. So let me know in the comment section down below, over on Twitter at @KukaHill. Will Paul Reed force himself some minutes this upcoming year? And what does that mean is going to happen? Is Stu going to play the 4 again? Is he going to play the 5? How's that going to work? Let me know in the comment section down below, or over on Twitter at KukaHill. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. I really apologize, guys. I know my voice has been, you guys can tell I'm sick. I don't know what's going on. I just haven't been feeling better. I've been trying to fight through it, but I apologize if it's getting on your guys' nerves, how my voice sounds. I'm trying to get better. I do appreciate all of your guys' support. If you guys are listening to this and have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please hit that subscribe button. We're on our way to 10,000 subscribers by the end of this upcoming year. So I really appreciate it. But I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Stay safe out there. I appreciate all of you guys. Preseason's right around the corner. Open practice is around the corner as well. Piston season's here. It's going to be a lot of fun, hopefully. We'll see what happens. I'll see you guys in the next one. Until next time, peace out.